all of us are expecting them to take Heisman Trophy winner and national champion Fernando Mendoza out of Indiana. The franchise will also have around $83 million in projected cap space, that according to our ESPN roster management system. All right, we're bringing Graz now, and of course, Graz, the Raiders are projected to take a quarterback, number one overall, that being Fernando Mendoza. How much do you think that player and the scheme fit with Clint Kubiak factored into this hire?
Well, I think a lot. Look, everything's going to revolve around Mendoza, assuming they take him with the first pick. And I can tell you that head coach candidates that interviewed with the Raiders, Mendoza was a topic of conversation, that he was brought up. What do you think of him? How would you coach him, et cetera? So that does seem to be the way it is leaning. Clint Kubiak has a history, obviously what he did with Sam Darnold this year in Seattle, what he did to a certain extent early in the 2024 season with Derek Carr and the Saints offense before they all got hurt. So there is some track record of him getting the most out of his quarterback. Mendoza will obviously need a better offensive line than the one that Geno Smith played behind this year, and they probably need to address wide receiver.
5'9", about 210. Ashton Jeanty, 5'8", about 210, right? Downhill, low to the ground, one cut back. Of course, Jeanty pays so that the play action can be a huge part of their game. And maybe Brock Bowers is even a bigger part of that play action. Maybe it's not a receiver who's getting those over routes. Maybe it's going to be Bowers. So I'm excited about the running game in Ashton Jeanty in this offense specifically led by Kubiak.
Yeah, I think a lot of it makes sense in terms of the tree that Kubiak falls off. Obviously, it's Mike Shanahan, Gary Kubiak, Kyle Shanahan, Sean McVay, the LaFleurs, Mike McDaniel. Like, there are guys that have coached in this system that have, quite honestly, a lot of success. Like, when you have a tried and true belief in terms of how you've been coached and taught things, I think it makes sense in terms of, okay, if we want to replicate success in the National Football League, how do we do that? So, yeah, I think that. And then I also think when you look at what he was able to do in Seattle, look, much of the passing game revolved around JSN. It's not easy to do, but he did a good job of moving him around. They had success with two different backs. They had, Sam Darnold, one year in Seattle, obviously have a chance to get the best out of the guys that he had. I think that's why people should be excited about it. Now, that's just one part of it. The other aspect of it is, how do you lead an entire team? Because it's not just about game planning when you're the head coach.
No doubt about it, Tim, but for the first time in, frankly, a long time, it actually feels like the Raiders have some reason for optimism because they're building on the same track and trajectory as opposed to last offseason where it felt like they made a win-now coaching hire with a roster that was clearly not ready to win now. One of the big offseason storylines in Vegas is not just who they're going to take at quarterback, but also the future of their best player, that being defensive end Max Crosby. Kubiak was asked about Crosby earlier today.
I got to drink a cup of coffee with Max this morning. Love talking ball with him, and look forward to continuing those conversations. He was the first one in here this morning working out, so that fired me up. We want him to be a part of our success going forward. There's no doubt about that.
Graz, Kubiak is saying the right things, but what more can you tell us about what's going on there with Max Crosby?
Well, there's a lot of chatter around the league field about Max Crosby being upset with the Raiders for the way last season ended. Remember, they put him on injured reserve with a couple of games to go, and he disagreed with that decision, wanted to keep playing. So there may be some relationship repair that has to take place. Max Crosby could make an issue of it, force his way out. He wouldn't be the hardest guy in the world to trade. He's going to make a guaranteed $30 million this year, and the way the Raiders do contracts, with either no signing bonus or minimal signing bonuses, it wouldn't be a big dead money hit to them to trade him, and they could get a lot of picks back to help kickstart their rebuild. But that's a key question. Do they want to keep Max Crosby as a cornerstone piece, and does he want to be there and remain that? Or do you look into the possibility of trading him for a boatload of picks, which could obviously help the Raiders in a number of ways?
No doubt about it, Graz. See, as I mentioned, the timeline earlier between the head coach and the GM with a new young quarterback. It is going to be something of a rebuild here for Las Vegas. Perhaps Max Crosby is a part of that. If not, he's going to bring a bunch of draft picks in return. Let's assume Fernando Mendoza does go number one overall. He'd be the first quarterback taken by the Raiders in the first round since 2007, when the team, of course, took Jamarcus Russell first overall. They're hopeful for a better outcome this time. Yeah. Let's go back to Seattle, where Kubiak previously coached, and they made several recent roster moves that helped turn things around for this franchise. The first 2 rounds have been very good to Seattle over the past 4 drafts. Look at these 11 picks that they made in the first 2 rounds over the last 4 drafts. Jackson Smith-Njigba, Devin Witherspoon, Super Bowl MVP, Kenneth Walker. They made some tough decisions as well as they moved on from head coach Pete Carroll. After 14 seasons back in January of 2024, they hired Mike Macdonald, who has won 27 games in 2 seasons and just helped the team to a 2nd Super Bowl title. Of course, the team also did make moves at the wide receiver spot, releasing Tyler Lockett, and trading DK Metcalf. They brought back Cooper Kupp and Rashid Shaheed. Most notable one, though, is, of course, the quarterback position. Geno Smith traded to the Las Vegas Raiders. He got a 3rd-round pick in return. They then signed Sam Darnold to a 3-year deal, very similar to Geno Smith's extension in Las Vegas. Clearly a major upgrade, plus a 3rd-round pick added into the mix. Tim, when you look at how Seattle was able to build this championship team, what maybe stands out to you the most?
Well, I mean, the quarterback. I mean, let's face it, you just mentioned the deal, Field. I mean, because of the situation in Minnesota, because Minnesota decided, hey, we're going to deal with a rookie contract at quarterback, they had a massive upgrade with Sam Darnold. And, you know, there weren't a bunch of people saying, can you believe that? Can you believe they just swapped out Geno Smith for Sam Darnold? I mean, there probably were a lot of people that weren't sure if it was going to be an upgrade. But I think John Schneider deserves a lot of credit when you think about what he's done. It's easier when you have a starter at quarterback to get worse than better. He moved on from Russell Wilson and got better with Geno Smith. He moved on from Geno Smith and got better with Sam Darnold. That really is it. No matter how much you hit in the draft, hit in free agency, if you get stuck with a quarterback that can't play, you can't win at all. They hit it right at quarterback. We see the end result.
Seattle has a ton of cap space this offseason and some big free agent decisions to make. That, of course, includes Kenneth Walker III. Keep in mind, they got a lot of players due for extensions soon as well. How do you see all this money being divvied up this offseason?
Yeah, those extensions, a couple of big ones that you mentioned, Jackson Smith-Njigba and Devin Witherspoon, both eligible for the first time, and certainly both seem set to cash in. But you look at this list of free agents, obviously Rashid Shaheed was a key piece for them down the stretch. Kenneth Walker III, the Super Bowl MVP. How does that shake out? It will depend on a lot of factors. What does Kenneth Walker want? Does he want to max out and try and get a top-of-the-market running back deal? He is only 25. And obviously coming off a monster performance in the Super Bowl, so he could have other suitors. If the Seahawks, I don't see the Seahawks wanting to get into a bidding war with other teams for a running back, so we'll see how that happens. They are very wedded to their roster-building principles, and I'm sure they have a value in mind for starting running back, and winning the Super Bowl field only validates those principles. So if they're not eager to overpay for a running back, it might be that he moves on.
Yeah, but they should be eager to find an offensive coordinator. I don't think that running back is as important of a position, Kenneth Walker specifically, as finding who's going to run this offense. Why do I say that? Kenneth Walker was the MVP of the Super Bowl, but remember, Zach Charbonnet is on that roster as well. He was injured. And so for me, it's more about the scheme. Do you want an offensive coordinator that's going to fit the same scheme that Kubiak had, outside zone, stretch scheme, or you're going to get maybe a different mind that maybe might work with Mike McDonald's defense and say, okay, I have a different type of scheme. And so OC is the biggest position of need rather than all the free agents that may be unrestricted right now.
And a big offseason ahead for Seattle, but for now, to the victor goes the spoils. They got to enjoy the fact that they are once again Lombardi champs. By the way, they might have a chance next year as well. As according to the DraftKings Sportsbook, the Seahawks are currently co-favorites with who else other than the Rams to win next year's Super Bowl. Those two teams, of course, had great battles this year and last. How about this? Cooper Kupp shared a DM he got from Jaron Reed, a fellow Seahawk, just one day after he was cut by the Rams last year. Reed saying, quote, "Bro, we would love to have you in Seattle, my guy. We are building something special over here." Turns out Jaron Reed was very much right. In Los Angeles, where the Rams GM Les Snead was asked about Puka Nacua's future in L.A.
Does Nacua fall into a different category? And in terms of priorities, in terms of getting it done, where does that fall?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. Those are, it seems simple, right? If you're one of the best at what you do, and obviously he's evolved into one of the best. Seems like, okay, that's pretty simple. But there's also so many variables. There's other players whose contracts are up, maybe similar to a few players we've had in the past, like you said, that have been at that level. In the ecosystem, you got to begin communication and begin working through it to come up with a win-win solution.
The Rams enter the offseason still reeling from a crushing defeat to the eventual Super Bowl champion Seahawks in the NFC title game. Matthew Stafford, who took home MVP honors last week, assured fans during his victory speech that he would be back for an 18th season. The Rams own the 13th and 29th overall picks in April's NFL draft after making that draft day trade with Atlanta a year ago. All right, so Graz, let's talk about a team that has been so close. They have, as a matter of fact, lost to the eventual champion in back-to-back playoffs. But what more can you tell us about how the Rams plan on securing their top wideout, Puka Nacua, this offseason?
Yeah, they'd certainly like to do it. Remember, Puka Nacua was not a first-round pick, so they do not have a fifth-year option. He has 1 year left on his contract and would be a free agent at the end of the year if they don't re-sign him. The issue, I think, with Puka Nacua is that Jackson Smith-Njigba in Seattle is also eligible for a contract extension. So, as you know, Field, in a lot of these situations, players at the same position will kind of play a game of chicken and see, each waiting for the other to go first and then try and top it. So if that's what Puka Nacua wants to do, then I think this is the kind of thing that could drag out. Seattle does have a fifth-year option on Jackson Smith-Njigba, and that might give them more time. But Jamar Chase is at $40.25 million a year. The second highest paid wide receiver is Justin Jefferson at $35 million a year. These guys are certainly going to want to try and top Chase's number, but I wonder if it ends up slotting somewhere in between those two guys.
Yeah, I would guess that it does for a guy like Nacua. Now, the interesting thing about it, too, is like Nakua's been a bargain. You mentioned not coming in as a first-round draft pick, but he's played, you could argue, as well as any receiver has played since coming into the league. And so I think when you look at it from that perspective, and I think that's what Les Snead was referring to, is, look, when you're at this level, which is you're at the top of the market at wide receiver. And then I think the other aspect of it is this, when you think of what the Rams have done in the past. Look, they at one point told Matthew Stafford just a couple years ago, go see what's out there. And when they found out what was out there, they were like, all right, let's get this deal done with Matthew Stafford. Now he's coming off of an MVP season. Like, you better, better hurry up. And it helps them, I think, to say, look, Stafford's going to be here to get Nacua back, knowing, okay, like, this is what the environment will be. So cash poor guy relative to guys playing in position, how he came in the league, and the fact that Stafford's back.
Yeah, the Rams have sort of what I would call a good problem this offseason because in addition to Puka Nacua, they have to make decisions on extensions for guys like Steve Avila, Kobe Turner, and Byron Young. Plus, they got news just moments ago that their longtime right tackle, Rob Havenstein, is going to retire after 11 seasons. He announced that himself over on Instagram News. The Rams probably were forecasting, but still a gap on the right side of the offensive line that Warren McClendon filled in very admirably for this past season. Let's go to Cleveland, where David Njoku, the Browns tight end, has announced on his own Instagram page that he would not be returning to Cleveland next season. So, Graz, with David Njoku hitting free agency, is there a team or teams in mind that could make a run at him?
I mean, the first one that jumped to mind to me was the Atlanta Falcons, whose new coach is Kevin Stefanski, who coached Njoku in Cleveland. They have Kyle Pitts eligible for free agency, so if they were to let him go or lose him to another team, Njoku might fit. We know he fits in what Stefanski wants to run offensively, but he's a player that should draw interest. He's been productive. He's been a dirty work guy for the Browns, and I'm sure he's going to have appeal on the open market.
I think the Detroit Lions, for me, are a great fit for David Njoku. The reason I say that is that the Lions have a new offensive coordinator in Drew Petzing. Drew Petzing spent the last 3 years with the Arizona Cardinals, in which he not only had Trey McBride, who led the league in many tight end categories, but also they ran a ton of 12 personnel. That's one thing the Arizona Cardinals did an amazing job of, 12 and 13 personnel. And so you already have Sam Laporta, who's coming off of a back injury. Maybe he's healthy by the beginning of the season, maybe he's not. But then you pair him with Njoku. To me, that just seems like the perfect fit for that player and that offense.
Keep in mind, by the way, the legal negotiating window for free agency is less than a month away. So before you know it, all kinds of transactions will be taking place in the NFL. Coming up next year on NFL Live, uncertainty is under chicken on Dallas, where they expected to place their franchise tag on star wideout George Pickens. The projected cost of that tag would be roughly $28 million. But according to Jerry Jones, the Cowboys plan to lock in Pickens for at least next season and beyond. Take a listen.
I'm talking to George all the time by virtue of my excitement for him. And he's better than as far as what he contributed to our team, showing the potential that he could contribute. So I'm looking forward to getting things worked out so George will be a Cowboy a long time.
Graz, keeping you busy here today. What more can you tell us about the Cowboys' plans for George Pickens?
We know from past experience that there's no one less afraid to use the franchise tag on a star player than Jerry Jones. We've seen him do it with Dak Prescott a couple of times. We saw him do it last year with Micah Parsons. Obviously, that didn't work out. That is my expectation, that they will franchise George Pickens. And sure, they'll continue to talk to him about a long-term deal. But the question is, what does he want? Does he want to get near the top of the wide receiver market off a big year? Or would he be okay with being the T. Higgins to C.D. Lamb's Jamar Chase, the Devontae Smith to C.D. Lamb's A.J. Brown? These are good numbers for number 2 wide receivers. The question is, would George Pickens want to do that? The franchise tag projects right around this area here at about $28 million. If they were to franchise him the next 2 years, that's $62 million over 2 years. You would think any contract negotiation would start at that number in terms of guarantees and the first 2 years payment. But we'll see. This could be filled. I know it's been a long time, but this could be an offseason where we talk a lot about contract drama and a Cowboys star.
Well, listen, and if you're Pickens, 93 catches, over 1,000 yards, 9 touchdowns, you're not going in there acting like a number 2 wide receiver. You're just not. And so I think the idea that, they could be at odds in terms of how they see, how Pickens sees himself and how the team sees him potentially could be different. And then the history, Graz, as you mentioned, in terms of, quite frankly, I think the Cowboys have been cheap. They've been reluctant. They've been slow. Ultimately, it's cost them more money or a good player because of how they've handled it. And I could see it going down a similar path in that if he's franchised, maybe he plays on that deal. But ultimately, if they want to keep a player of his caliber, then it'll take true number 1 wide receiver money, because there were parts of this season where he was the best wide receiver in football. And he, in terms of size, athleticism, and things that he can do that other guys can't do, even guys like Puka Nacua, like guys can't do, like that's going to get rewarded by somebody in the National Football League.
Cowboys and contract drama. What else would an NFL offseason be without that? But let's go to a couple more thoughts beyond George Pickens. Acho, he's going to probably be tagged, but is there another part of the Dallas roster or parts that should be focused on this offseason?
The Cowboys should be focused on addressing their secondary. The reason why is that defensive line has been improved dramatically. Quinnen Williams, outstanding young talent. Kenny Clark, a veteran in the game. DeMarvion Overshown at linebacker, a steady force. But I think that cornerback position needs to be addressed. They have a new defensive coordinator in Christian Parker, a young defensive mind, 34 years old. I understand the defense struggled last season, but if you just add some pieces on the back end to complement what Dallas will be able to do on that defensive line, I think that'll help this team be more complete. Yes, George Pickens and C.D. Lamb and a young offensive line, first-round picks all around it, but I think the corner position needs to be addressed.
Keep in mind the Cowboys own picks 12 and 20 in the upcoming first round of the 2026 NFL Draft. Let's go to quarterbacks. The Cowboys are all set there, but one of the most intriguing names on the QB market is Packers backup Malik Willis, who's scheduled to become a free agent in March. With his dual threat traits and positive signs of development, he made a major impact during his opportunities in Green Bay. In 4 appearances, including 1 start in 2025, Willis completed just under 86% of his throws, rushed for 123 yards, and accounted for 5 touchdowns. Graz, back to you one more time. What have you been hearing around the league about the market for Malik Willis?
Well, he'll have one. I don't doubt it. It's a light year in free agency and in the draft, I guess, for quarterbacks. So he's shown enough in Green Bay to be intriguing to a lot of teams, and we'll see. I think, most people I talk to kind of figure something along the lines of like the 2-year deal Justin Fields got with the Jets last year, but if there are enough teams interested, it could certainly go even higher than that.
There's no doubt that there's going to be a market for him, I think. You mentioned kind of he's at the top of it, quite frankly, and because he's played, because of the fact that coaches that are connected to guys in Green Bay or came from Green Bay are going to places where they need a quarterback, I think it'll be strong for Willis. I think Willis will end up finding himself in a situation where, he's getting starter money, and he's going to get a little bit of a runway because of how he's kind of remade his career with how he played in Green Bay when he had the opportunity.
One of the teams that could be interested in Malik Willis, and this is just me dot connecting here, is the Miami Dolphins, who have a huge decision to make when it comes to their own quarterback, Tua Tagovailoa. The Dolphins are looking to explore trading partners for their starting quarterback, but if Miami decides to just cut Tua, it would leave a $99 million dead cap hit, which would be the largest in NFL history. Keep in mind that Tua led the NFL with 4,624 passing yards in 2023, made his first and only Pro Bowl that year. He then went on to sign a 4-year, $212.4 million extension of July that following offseason. Since then, things have not gone great. The Dolphins' single collar is below 500 and has seen dips in both his quarterback rating and his yards per attempt over the last 2 seasons. So, Graz, it's going to be a difficult pill to swallow for Miami no matter what. How likely is it they find a trade partner, though?
I don't think it's super likely, Field. He's guaranteed $54 million this year, and another $3 million for next year becomes guaranteed early in the league year next month. So if the Dolphins are going to trade Tua, they're probably going to have to pay down some of that contract. Keep in mind that $99 million dead money is roughly the same percentage of the cap that Russell Wilson's $80 was for the Broncos 2 years ago.
I understand that, but I would actually lean towards not only letting go of Tua, but going with Quinn Ewers, a young quarterback who last year got a chance to show what he could do. I understand the dead cap hit, I get that, but with the new coach in town and a new culture, it's likely that they're not necessarily going to find a trade partner, but release Tua, take the cap hit, and start afresh either with Quinn Ewers or maybe address it in free agency, maybe a guy like Kirk Cousins or the draft.
You got to throw up the hook 'em horns when you bring up Quinn Ewers, my friend Sam Macho. The Cardinals find themselves in a similar position to the Miami Dolphins as they are also exploring to trade their veteran quarterback, that being Kyler Murray. If Arizona decides to release Murray before June 1st, they would take on a $54.7 million dead cap hit. A lot, but not much compared to Tua Tagovailoa. If you did this as a post-June 1 cut, you can spread that money out over 2 years. After 3 seasons with Jonathan Gannon at the helm, Arizona has turned to Mike LaFleur as their new head coach. LaFleur has served as the Rams' offensive coordinator the last 3 seasons. He's now going to look to turn the Cardinals' offense into what is arguably the toughest division in the sport. They do have the 3rd overall pick in the upcoming draft. So, Tim, what should Arizona's plans be for Kyler Murray?
I think they should plan on releasing him. Much like the Tua situation, I don't know that you end up finding a trade partner for Kyler. Now, I do think when he hits the open market, there will be teams that are very interested in him, mainly because, he's been a starter. He does have a unique skill set that I think that coaches believe that you can win with. And there are going to be places, whether it's the Atlanta Falcons, who, find themselves in a really tough situation because of their quarterback situation. Minnesota, who may be looking at their situation much like Indianapolis looked at theirs with Anthony Richardson to say, look, we need to bring somebody in to compete. Maybe he will play. And so I think situations like that will be attractive to somebody like Kyler Murray. And so ultimately, I think it's a release and then hit free agency. And then I think there'll be a market after the Malik Willis market for Kyler Murray.
Yeah, similar to what we said about the Dolphins and Tua, if the Cardinals are going to succeed in trading Kyler Murray, they probably have to pay down some of the contract. $36.8 million guaranteed this year. And if he's on your roster the 3rd day of the league year, about 5 weeks from right now, $19.5 million of his 2027 money becomes fully guaranteed. So that's going to be a lot for an acquiring team, especially giving up draft picks to get him. to want to take on. I lean toward him being released, but I guess if the Cardinals are willing to swallow a chunk of the money, it is possible they could get somebody to trade for him.
Assuming this is it for Kyler Murray and the Cardinals, just one playoff appearance in 7 seasons is being taken
this year. And the reality is great receivers, even unselfish ones like Jefferson has been in Minnesota. Look, you're a dependent position. You need the guy throwing the ball to be at least adequate in order to do the things that you want to do, in your career, which I'm sure Jefferson does. So, look, maybe they can get it figured out in Minnesota. He's played with a number of quarterbacks already, but ultimately, there's probably a little bit of truth in his laugh of, wouldn't it be bad to go somewhere where I could produce more?
All right, let's go to Philadelphia, where Eagles wide receiver A.J. Brown had this to say about all the offseason changes on offense.
I'm always excited. Sometimes change is not a bad thing. But I'm excited for the season. I'm excited for what's to come. We have great leaders in our locker room, and I'm fortunate to be a part of that, especially on offense. And we do have a lot of talent, but talent gets us nowhere.
Facts.
So it's all about being detailed and being disciplined.
Acho, what's the biggest issue facing the new offensive coordinator in Philadelphia, Sean Mannion?
And maybe trying to find a new offensive line coach. I believe a new coach has been hired, but now Jeff Stoutland, who's been the renowned offensive line coach for Philly for so many years, has stepped down. And so what happens to guys like Lane Johnson? What happens to guys like Landon Dickerson? What do they do with the new offensive line coach? How do they interact? What do they think about their future? So that's, I think, the biggest concern for Sean Mannion. Not the players on the roster, but, man, you have a coach who's been there for a long time, who helped coach what has been the best or one of the best offensive lines for the last several years, now is gone. What do the players do in response?
All right, finally we go to Atlanta, where Falcons' new president of football operations, Matt Ryan, also their quarterback back in the day, would not commit to Michael Penix Jr. as a starting quarterback for the upcoming season. He left the door open as the team evaluates its options.
Well, neither of us are the head coach of the football team, so we can't answer your question on that. But I think those are conversations that'll be a part of it. Quarterback's obviously very important, and we're excited about Mike and what he's doing with his rehab, but certainly a lot of discussions for us about the entire roster.
To make the situation even more interesting, according to our guy Adam Schefter, the Falcons are expected to release Kirk Cousins before the start of the new league year in March, allowing him to choose where or if he wants to play in 2026. A lot going on here, Graz, but what more can you tell us about the quarterback situation in Atlanta?
Well, as Matt Ryan mentioned, Michael Penix Jr. is coming off a significant injury, and so they don't know what they have in him until they get a little bit deeper into their offseason, see where his rehab is headed, and whether he'd even be ready to start the season. So they'll need to find another option, at least for the offseason. You mentioned Cousins. He'll be cut because if he's still on the roster first day of the league year, then $68 million in 2027 salary becomes guaranteed, and they're not going to want to do that. So they could bring him back on a different deal, Cousins I'm talking about, but I think they'll explore a lot of options like a lot of these other teams we're talking about. And if Michael Penix rehab's great and can start week 1 and looks like the future, then I'm sure Matt Ryan would be open to that as well.
Graz, my takeaway from all of these quarterback conversations we've had on the show so far today is that salary cap managers are going to be very busy this offseason around the NFL.